Kostya would never have returned home if it hadn't been for the ball that fell into the flowers at Baba Aglia's house. His friends, playing soccer with him, treacherously ran away, afraid of the witch's revenge. Kostya, having imagined his parents' reaction, had to return the ball he had recently bought. The 13-year-old boy was more afraid of his father's punishment than the owner of the flower garden. Having gathered courage, he approached the fence and deftly climbed over it, but as luck would have it, the edge of his shirt caught on a nail and, making a characteristic sound, freed himself from captivity. Looking at the torn t-shirt, Kostya realized that punishment was imminent, but fearing a flogging for the lost ball, he started looking for it. Carefully pulling apart daisies, asters, poppies, dahlias, and petunias, Kostya didn't hear the old woman come up to him. "What are you doing here?" Bones' heart instantly sank into his heels and his knees shook. Stammering, he confessed that he was looking for the ball, and immediately regaining his senses, began to beg the witch not to tell his parents. "They are not your parents," answered the old woman in a rough voice, letting go of Kostya's shoulder. "Look at the flowers. Do you see your shadow on them?" "Yes," he answered barely audibly. "And now look at mine." Kostya looked at the flowers near the old woman. "It is not there." "Exactly. Now look at the shadow from the tree." Kostya looked again. The asphalt was illuminated on all sides by the sunlight. "Nothing in this village has a shadow, but those who are not of this world do. You need to go home. I will help you, but to do so, you must bring me the purple flower that grows by the stream." The old woman was silent, reading the thoughts of the uninvited guest. "So you don't believe me? Then look at my face." Kostya looked up. The wrinkles on the old woman's face quickly dissolved, revealing her skull. The green eyes bulging out of the eye sockets stared at him intently. Kostya rushed away. Instantly he climbed over the fence, and forgetting about the ball, rushed home. Just as the old woman had said, there were no shadows under the trees, or behind the houses, or at the fences. Everything was illuminated by the bright summer sun, but Kostya paid no attention to it. Breaking his head, he ran home, hoping that his mother would protect him from the vile witch. "Mommy, Mommy," Kostya shouted, running into the kitchen. The witch, she, seeing his mother, he froze. Her face, like the old woman's, was bare to the skull. Bulging brown eyes stared at her son. "What witch?" A familiar voice asked. Kostya lowered his eyes. There was no shadow under his mother. He looked beside him. A shapeless black shape was visible at his feet. What witch? She what? She took the ball. We were playing soccer, and it flew into her flower garden. I promise you, it wasn't our fault. Kostya burst into tears. He didn't understand why he was talking about the ball. For a moment it seemed to him that someone was controlling him. "Did you see the witch?" "I tried to take the ball, even climbed over the fence, but she grabbed my hand and said she would kill me if I trampled on her flowers. I barely escaped." Kostya wiped away his tears with his fists. He didn't understand why he was lying. "She didn't tell you anything else?" "No." The woman exhaled with relief. She went to the table, took out a glass and poured a green drink into it, and handed it to her son. "Have a drink, but don't cry." Kostya took the glass with pleasure. He liked Nutar. He greedily drank the drink and looked at his mother. Her skull was quickly covered with skin, and soon her face was as beautiful as before. A slightly dark-haired, skinny woman of 25, with black hair braided to her waist, looked at him with loving eyes. "Now smile," she said in a gentle voice, and Kostya, forgetting everything, smiled. Kostya lay on the bed and tried to sleep. His thoughts were confused, reminding him again and again of his meeting with Aglaya. Gradually, the unpleasant memories came back. The full moon illuminated the room. As in sunlight, nothing threw shadows. Kostya glanced at the clock, the beginning of the first. Taking a deep breath, he turned to the wall and closed his eyes for the umpteenth time. His subconscious was once again drawing the outline of a skull. A noise was heard nearby. Kostya heard someone slowly opening the door. "Is he asleep?" A man's voice asked in a whisper. "Asleep," answered a female voice. "I'll give those two lazy bums a beating tomorrow. All they have to do is look after the children while we prepare for the ceremony." And the father said angrily. The mother slowly closed the door, but Kostya heard a couple more phrases. "The girl you stole today is so pretty. Why do the Zakharovs need her? Lidka hates children. Let's take her for ourselves, so you can get attached again and then cry." "No way. I'm not glad we took Kostya. You spend all day in the kitchen, spoiling him. And you've forgotten all about me. But I want kids so badly. Let's keep at least one." Kostya could hardly hear. He got out of bed, wanting to hear more, but the board creaked treacherously under his feet, forcing him back to bed. Covering himself, he pretended to be asleep, but not hearing the creak, the adults continued the argument in their room. When Kostya opened his eyes, the sunlight was shining through the green of the trees, illuminating the ball lying on the floor. "My parents must have taken it away," came to mind. Kostya stood up, walked over to the chair with his clothes, and began to dress. Scraps of what he had heard and seen yesterday flashed through his mind. Putting on his shorts, Kostya took his t-shirt. He remembered that he had torn it, but now the t-shirt was intact. Kostya examined it carefully, but not finding a single trace of yesterday's adventure, he decided that he had dreamed it all. Joyful, he flew into the kitchen. His mother was gone, but there were freshly baked rolls on the table. He reached out his hand and saw a shadow quickly touch them. Taking a bun, he pulled it toward him, but the shadow from the bun did not fall. Kostya looked around the room. Just like yesterday, everything was devoid of shadow. So it wasn't a dream, then. Am I really from another world, he wondered. "Are you awake yet?" Entering the kitchen, his mother asked in a gentle voice. From surprise, Kostya jumped up. He hadn't heard her coming. "Aha," he answered, watching his mother coming to the stove. "Sit down. I'll pour you some Nutar. You can drink it with a bun." She quietly opened the cupboard, took out a glass, and also quietly poured the drink. Kostya had not paid attention before, but now he realized that the house was perfectly silent. Nothing made a single sound. He took a couple of steps to the side to move the chair away. A faint stomping could be heard under his feet. "Mother, why do you call Grandma Aglaya a witch?" Kostya asked, biting into his bun. The question took the woman by surprise. She silently put the glass on the table. "Why?" he persisted. "Did she say anything else to you?" The mother answered the question with a question. Now Kostya found himself in a quandary. "No, just curious. So you remember meeting her?" The mother said in a barely audible, thoughtful voice. "I'll pour you another glass of Nutar tonight, but don't say anything to your father. Not just your father, don't say anything to anyone. No one must know that you remember, or your father will punish you. You don't want that, do you?" "No." After breakfast, Pashka and Sashka came to Kostya's house. They lived in neighboring houses and always played with him. The boys looked about 14 years old, but Kostya didn't see a shadow under them either. Not wanting to think about what was happening, he grabbed the ball and ran off to play soccer. This time they played in a clearing. After a couple of hours, a 5-year-old girl ran up to the soccer players. "I want to play with you too," she cried out. Kostya looked at her. Small, round-cheeked, blue-eyed with big eyelashes and curly hair, dressed in a blue dress with a bow on the back. She looked like a doll. "All right," said Pasha, stopping the ball flying towards him. "Nastya, what do you want to play?" "Not dolls." "Nastya," thought Kostya. How did he know her name? There were no girls in the village. And no children either, just me, Sashka, and Pashka. Where did she come from? Unhappy, Kostya sat at the table and picked at his fried potatoes. He always enjoyed eating it, but now he had no appetite. His father sat next to him and read the newspaper. He came home in a bad mood. He, too, had had a bad day. "Kostya, eat," said his mother, keeping her eyes full of tenderness on him. Can you imagine? Those traitors have been playing with the girl all day long. Who is she anyway? Where did she come from? And why did they behave with her as if they had known her all their lives? Kostya was angry. The woman instantly put her index finger to her lips and looked at her husband with frightened eyes. He, not listening to the conversation at the table, continued to read the newspaper. "How about I pour you another glass of Nutar and you eat the potatoes in silence?" she suggested. Kostya readily agreed. "Kostya," said the woman, putting her son to bed, "promise me that when there are children in the village whom you don't remember or don't know, don't tell anyone. Everyone must think you know them. Okay? But why? It doesn't matter. Promise." "I promise." "Good girl," she said, and kissed her son on the forehead and said good night. "Good night to you too, Mommy," he said to the woman leaving the room. Soon she took the candle with her and closed the door, but the room was still bright, illuminated by the light of the full moon. A few days later, another child appeared in the village, an 8-year-old boy, and everyone behaved with him as if they had known him all their lives. As soon as Kostya got used to Nastya, he had to play with Maxim. But fortunately, the newcomer was not sporty, and after playing with them for half an hour in the knockout game, he went home. Sashka and Pashka were upset, but they couldn't change anything. At home at dinner, Kostya told his mother about everything. And this time he blurted out, "He's from my world too." "What do you mean, from your world?" Kostya instantly pressed his lips together. "Konstantin," the woman said sternly. "He has a shadow like me and Nastya. No one else has it." He soon gave in. "So that's how it is. How long have you known?" Kostya was silent. "Did Baba Aglaya tell you?" He continued to keep silent. The woman stood up, went to a shelf, took out a glass and a drink, and placing it on the table in front of him, said quietly, "When you drink Nutar, you must forget the past and acquire a new memory." Such as the drink was spoken for. But it doesn't work on you. That's why you remember everything. I don't know what the old woman did to you. The rules say I have to report it to the priestess, but then they'll take you away from me. And I don't want that. The woman sobbed. Kostya hugged her. "And I don't want to leave you, Mommy. I love you." "No, you don't. You think you do. It's all magic." She sobbed harder. "And I'm not your mother. Why did you agree to that right? I wish I was dead." Kostya, surrounded by children, was playing in the sandbox. A pigeon flew lazily by. It sat down near the bench opposite. A 5-year-old girl threw small pieces of bread to the birds gathered around. Suddenly the wind picked up. "Kostya, a black cloud is coming. Let's go home." He heard a woman's voice. Turning his head, Kostya saw a full blonde woman taking his hand. "I knew it would rain as soon as we got to the playground. The forecast said it would rain for a reason. I should have stayed home. Thunder rang out and the woman, pulling Kostya by the hand, headed towards the apartment buildings. He raised his head. A large drop fell on his forehead. Soon it was noisy all around. The cloud is still far away. The woman was angry. Let's go faster. She quickened her step. Kostya could barely keep up with her. There was thunder again, and Kostya opened his eyes. He found himself in his room. The ball was lying next to him, as always, in the same place. Kostya noticed that wherever he left it, in the morning the ball was always in the room. After getting dressed, he ran to the kitchen. The woman, as usual, was preparing breakfast. Greeting his mother, he sat down at the table. "Now I'll throw in a pan cutlets and pour potatoes," she said. Kostya looked out the window. As usual, the sun lit up everything around him. "Doesn't it rain here?" he asked softly. The woman froze. "No. And how do you know about rain?" "I had a dream. Do you dream?" She looked at her son, holding a cutlet in her hands. "Yes. Today I dreamt about my childhood." And Kostya told the dream. "I haven't dreamt anything for a long time," she said in a sad voice. He quickened her step. When Sashka and Pashka came to fetch Kostya, his mother also came out to them. "Come in for a visit. I'll treat you to apple pies." Rejoicing, the company flew into the kitchen and, taking all the seats, with their mouths full, began to discuss plans for the day. The girl looked at the woman from under her forehead. "Nastya, will you have a cutlet with potatoes?" She waved her head. "Didn't your mother feed you this morning?" she asked, putting a plate of treats in front of her. "No. She said she didn't have time. She gave me a piece of bread and sent me for a walk." The woman's heart twitched. She stroked the girl's head and, kissing the top of her head, told her to come to them to eat. After feeding her, she brushed the little girl and braided her unruly hair into a thick braid. Kostya fell down on the grass from fatigue. Remembering the dream, he closed his eyes and imagined the breath of the wind, the coolness of the rain. A longing pinched in his heart. Kostya wanted to go home. "Hey, forward, get up!" Pasha shouted. Kostya sat up and opened his eyes. Instead of his friends, skeletons stood before him. Withered trees surrounded a clearing overgrown with tall grass, and near Maxim and Nastya stood tall, thin human figures in black robes, twisting the black thread they were pulling from the children into a ball. Kostya turned his head. A similar figure stood beside him, twisting the same black thread into a ball. "It's because I stopped drinking noodle," he thought, fighting the urge to run away and hide from the scary creatures. Mom said to pretend everything was still the same. But how could it be the same? "Mom, I'm scared." "No, I'm tired. Play with them." Trying not to show it, Kostya closed his eyes again and lay down on the grass. "Let's get up, lazybones." Pasha came up to him and pulled him by the arm. Kostya opened his eyes again. A blonde-haired guy, whose face was decorated with sparse freckles, was looking at him. "All right," he conceded. "I saw the Zakharov's girl today," the woman said quietly, pouring soup for her husband. "So what?" The man grumbled in a disgruntled tone. "Let's take her away." "Why?" "The Zakharovs don't look after her. They don't feed her. They don't brush her. And I. Why waste time on them if they're going to die soon?" Barely restraining his anger, the man took his hands off the table for his wife to put the plate down. "Even the cattle are fed before slaughter, and they starve." Nastya, swallowing her resentment, she replied. "Nastya, I've already memorized the name. Is it starting again? Why did I give in to you? I should have given Kostya to the Ivanovs." It was their lot to have the first child. But I went along with you and made a deal with them. Have you forgotten that you promised not to bring up the subject of children again? The man got angry. But they're hurting her. So what? In 2 weeks, she, Kostya, and 4 other children will be fed to Zervan. Or have you forgotten the ritual? I remember. But no buts. The children will die, will live. And don't you dare interfere again and ask the priestess to keep a child for you. Children don't belong in this village. But Sasha and Pasha were left. They were born in the village. And these children are newcomers. They have no place here. But I said no. The man shouted in a low voice, getting up from the table. I'm sick of this. It's the same thing every day. Tomorrow I'll go to the Ivanovs and tell them to take Kostya away. Enough. I'm fed up. I can't take it anymore. The man left the room. She sat down at the table and sobbed. Kostya stood near the roses, enjoying the sweet fragrance. The warm wind tried to steal their pink and scarlet petals. Birds were singing in the distance. Kostya called a familiar voice. He turned his head. At the table under the tree sat a full woman holding a baby in her arms. Next to her sat a thin, sickly pale man in glasses. Sit down at the table. Now Grandma will bring potatoes and Grandpa will bring kebabs. Satisfied, Kostya instantly ran to the table and sat down beside his mother. Oh, what fragrant kebabs. Kostya, smell it, said the gray-haired man, approaching the table and holding out a skewer to his grandson. The specific odor of smoke and meat made Kostya's stomach rumble. Evgeny Petrovich, next time I'll cook. Let's see who will taste better. Kostya's father couldn't resist. Yeah, right, my grill I'll cook. And you cook on your balcony. Sarcastic man. Everyone laughed merrily. Kostya opened his eyes. The same room, the same ball, the same t-shirt and shorts. Everything was the same as yesterday, the day before and a week ago. Nothing had changed. It was as if time had been renewed over and over again. As usual, having dressed, Kostya rushed to the kitchen. His mother was making pancakes and purring something softly under her nose. Let's make kebabs, he shouted in a cheerful voice. The woman jumped from surprise. Kostya, you scared me. She laughed. I want kebabs. I'm sick of potatoes, cutlets, and soup. And what are these, your shashliks? Shashliks. It's meat cooked on a grill. And the barbecue? Kostya thought about it. He didn't remember what it was, but he was sure that he would remember, just as he remembered about Mom and Dad and Sister Masha. Okay, we'll make them later. Maybe tomorrow, he decided, approaching the pancakes. They're still hot. Get the bottom one, his mother shouted with concern in her voice, running up to Kostya. But he had already taken the top one, and tolerating the heat but not showing it, smiled. It's not so hot. Kostya brought the pancake to his nose, sniffed it. There was no odor. Then he approached the bowl. Nothing. Kostya approached the pot of soup cooking on the stove. Taking a rag, he opened the lid. What are you doing? Sniffing. Why doesn't anything smell? Grandpa's kebabs smelled. I still remember the smell, but you don't smell anything. The woman wondered. Can you taste the flavor? Kostya took a bite of the pancake. Yes, it tasted good. The woman wanted to smell it and couldn't smell anything either. Taking the pancake, she bit into it. Strange, she thought. I wanted to make them sweet and threw in 3 times as much sugar as before. Aunt Sveta. A child's voice sounded outside the window, breaking the woman out of her thoughts. When she realized it, she rushed to the wicket. Nastya and Maxim were soon having breakfast with Kostya. "How delicious," Maxim said. "How lucky you are to have a mother. Mine doesn't cook so good. Neither does mine." The girl added. In an effort to please the children, Sveta added a little more sugar to the batter, but the pancakes didn't get any sweeter. Never before had she experimented with the flavor, cooking the same recipe every time. The woman added and added sugar, but the flavor didn't change. Then she added salt. Nothing changed. Why, she thought with bewilderment, looking at the cheerful children finishing their pancakes. Having fed, combed, and kissed all three of them goodbye, she went outside with them. Sashka and Pashka hurried to join them. "Aunt Sveta fed us pancakes," bragged the girl. "Are there any more left?" asked Pashka. The woman took out the remaining pancakes and, giving them to the boys, was about to go home when suddenly she saw Aglaya, who lived across the street and a bit askew, picking flowers. "Baba Aglaya," the woman called out. The old woman turned her head. "Svetka? What are you doing here?" "Forgive me, Grandma Aglaya," she begged. 20 years ago you were right. A life like ours is worse than death. Life is useless if there is nothing in it, no wind, no rain, no dreams, no smells, no children. I don't want to live like this anymore. Tell me, Mrs. Aglaya, how can we stop all this? I don't want these children to die too. They're so good." The old woman squinted her eyes and thought for a while. "There is one way," she said quickly, convinced of the sincerity of her guest's words. "There is a purple flower growing by the brook. Bring it to me. Only with it I will be able to destroy the magic of time." "All right, Granny Aglaya, I will. But be aware that it is guarded by an evil dog, a servant of the lower world. If he smells you, he'll tear you apart. No magic can help you here. You'll die like all those who tried to tear it before you. I'll be careful. Take care of yourself, sweetheart." The old woman said goodbye, leaning down to the flowers again. "You too." After a few hours of playing whippersnapper, the kids collapsed on the grass. "What else shall we play?" Sasha asked, kicking the ball with his foot. Everyone was thinking. "We should go to the river," Kostya said. "A river?" Sasha asked in surprise, having instantly lost count. Kostya bit his lip. He knew that there was no water body in the village. Perhaps there had been one once, but not now. Now the village was surrounded by a white mist that the children didn't even go near. Adults said that monsters lived in it, so most of the children spent most of their time in the clearing located between the two streets that made up the village. "Oh no," I blabbed. "My mom strictly forbade me to talk about my world. How can I get out of it?" he thought. "Hello, everyone," came from behind. Kostya turned around. A girl the same age as Kostya approached them. Angel flashed in his head. His heart raced, his stomach cramped. "Hello, Angela," Sashka said. "Hello." Angela mentally repeated the name, smiled Kostya. The girl turned her brown eyes to him. Meeting her eyes, Kostya instantly blushed. She smiled. "What are you playing?" she asked. Approaching Kostya, who was sitting on the edge, she sat down beside him. Her loose, long blonde hair touched the ground. "Dash, what you say. We'll play. Today everything is for you." Taking the ball in his hand, Sasha said. He came to Angelica and sat down next to her. The girl giggled. "I hate Sasha. He's been glued to her all day long. Even when we played hide and seek, he hid with her." Kostya said loudly, telling his mother about the previous day. The woman smiled. His father sat next to her, reading another newspaper taken from the other world. You didn't like to play with the newcomers, but now something has changed? Captivated by her son's story, Sveta asked. She had completely forgotten about her husband. I wanted to play with her. She is so beautiful, again blushing, said Kostya. The man frowned. He had heard their conversation. Sometimes he even smiled. There was nothing interesting in the newspaper, but Kostya's story interested him. Newcomers, he interjected, putting down the newspaper. His father looked at Kostya with stern eyes, then turned his gaze to his wife. What do you mean, newcomers? What's going on here? Kostya and his mother instantly lowered their eyes. Sveta raised his voice, the man. She was silent. Konstantin. The man looked at him. He, too, was silent. Sergei looked at the table. A plate with buckwheat porridge and meat, a bun and a glass of milk stood near Kostya. And where is Nutar? Have you stopped giving it? Looking at his wife again, the man was angry. Mom is not to blame. I didn't want it myself. Kostya interceded. What do you mean you didn't want it yourself? Sveta, you have to give it 3 times a day. I'll go to the priestess in the morning. No, don't, she screamed, falling into her husband's lap. I'm begging you. She'll take him. I can't bear to part with him. You broke every rule, screamed the man. Because of you, the ritual could fail and we could all die. Because of your kindness. Children. 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 All I can hear. I've had it. That was the last drop. He must drink Nutar every day. And you. When did you become so irresponsible? Because of you, he'll remember everything. It's not Mom's fault. Grandma Aglaia made the Nutar not work. Aglaia had it? That traitor? You let him in? And you didn't tell anyone about it? You. The man didn't know what to say. It was as if he was speechless. Silently standing up, he went to the door. Seryosha, where are you going? She asked in a guilty voice. Away from you. I have no place near the traitor. You are no longer my wife. Don't even look in my direction. He left. Kostya rushed to his mother and hugged her. They both cried. Finally calmed down, Sveta put Kostya to bed and, as usual, kissed him before going to sleep, left the room. The room was illuminated, as usual, by the light of the full moon. But this time Kostya saw neither ball nor chair. The rays shone down on the dark floor, covered with dirt and plaster, broken and mossy in places, as if through holes in the ceiling and windows. Everything around was covered with thick cobwebs. A thick layer of dust and crumbling plaster hid the furniture, which had partially disintegrated over the years. And again Kostya saw a black creature twisting something into a ball. And on the wall, like a spider, crawled another black creature like a man, but with thin, long arms and legs. It turned its head, and Kostya saw its eyes glowing red. Mom. Kostya shouted in a frightened voice and covered himself with his head under the blanket. The woman, leaving the dishes, rushed to her son. That night she slept with him. Sveta did not hear when her husband returned, how he found her in the nursery, kissed her, and went to sleep. She would never see her husband again. All night Kostya dreamed about fragments of his native world, but this time he saw his parents' scandals, drunken fights, and frequent punishments when his mother took out her anger on the children who got in her way. She often blamed Kostya for her broken life, shouting, "If it weren't for you, I never would have married that scoundrel." Kostya woke up. Quickly dressing, he rushed to the kitchen. His mother was preparing breakfast. Kostya ran up to her and hugged her. I love you, Mommy. Sobbing, he said. What happened? With anxiety in her voice, she asked. The woman wanted to turn around, but he squeezed her waist even harder. Nothing. I just love you. You're the best. I want to be always only with you. Kostya. Aunt Sveta came from the gate. When he came to his senses, Kostya let go of his mother and wiped away his tears. I invited Angela to breakfast. Don't tell her I cried, she'll laugh. All right, the woman left the kitchen, barely concealing her laughter. Going out into the yard, she opened the gate. Really like an angel, she thought, looking at her son's beloved. Standing next to her were Nastya and Maxim. Saying hello to the children, Sveta let them in and froze. The priestess's sons were walking down the street. Are they coming to see us? Did he really tell everything? When they take Kostya away, I'll be alone. Or perhaps they will punish and bewitch me, like Granny Aglaya. And I will never be able to leave the yard, and the children will call me a witch and avoid me. I will be alone forever. All alone flashed through my mind. Good morning, she said in a friendly voice, hiding her fear behind a smile as the men approached their house. Good, only I doubt it will be good for you. Grinning with eyes full of resentment and hatred, said the younger one. In spite of the fact that nearly 100 years had passed, he was not reconciled to the fact that Svetlana had preferred him to the weak-willed Sergei. So you remember about the river? Said the old woman, looking at Kostya with cunning eyes. She was sitting on a rocking chair by the window. The whole room was hung with dried herbs and flowers. About what? The river? What's that? He pretended. But in his mind he said, those traitors told me everything. I won't talk to them anymore. What else do you remember? Nothing, he answered. The main thing is not to blab about anything else. Don't worry, Mommy, I won't give you up. He thought again. Did Mama Sveta tell you everything? No, she didn't tell me anything. Mommy had nothing to do with it. I hope they don't take me away from my mom. I don't want to part with her, thought Kostya, looking at the priestess with angry eyes. Would you like some tea? The old woman asked. She got up and came to the table. No, thank you, Kostya answered, and remembering Sveta's words, thought that tea, like Nutar, might be enchanted. It's not enchanted, it's ordinary tea. Try it. The old woman poured the tea and handed Kostya a mug. He took it, confused, his hands trembling with fear. Are you reading my mind? Kostya realized, mentally continuing like Aglaya. So you've met her. Now I understand why the Nutar doesn't work. It does, the old woman laughed. Do you know that this is not your world? I know. The priestess took the tea and sat down on the chair. Do you know why you were brought to this village? For a ritual, he answered honestly. What was the ritual? I don't know. Probably so that no one would die. The old woman tasted her tea. Drink it, it's not hot, she said. Kostya sipped gingerly. Don't be afraid. It's just ordinary tea. Taking another sip, Kostya looked around. Behind him there was a stove, near which mushrooms were drying. At the far wall there were cabinets with books, jars, decanters with colorful potions. There was an animal skin on the floor. Do you want to go home? Sure. I haven't eaten. And then there's Angela, blushing, he thought again. The old woman looked beside Kostya. Show me the thread, she said into the void. How thick it is. A good thread. I've never seen anything like it. Go back. The old woman took another sip. How many days have you not drunk Nutar? How did she know flashed through my mind? Nutar makes the thread of life thin and weak. How long have you been sober? 3 days. You remember your real parents yet? Yes, he said, barely audibly. Do you want to go back to your world? No, I don't. I want to be here. With my mom, playing with Angela and the others. I like it here. The priestess thought for a moment, and after drinking her tea again, she replied, Well, go back to Mama Sveta and... The old woman stood up and took a piece of paper from the table and handed it to Kostya. Give her my message. Kostya took it, turned it around, and scrutinized it from all sides. It's blank for you, but she will see it. Disappointed and happy at the same time, Kostya rushed home. She's not as evil as his mother told me, he thought. First, the priestess called. As the boy left the house, a black creature came down from the ceiling, sliding down the wall, the one Kostya had seen yesterday. Now you are responsible for him. Keep watching. And report everything to me. With this threat I can regain my youth. She rejoiced. When Kostya was taken away, Svetlana fed the guests as if nothing had happened, and when she returned to the house, she burst into tears. Svetlana's world had collapsed. She no longer saw the meaning of life, and remembering the flower by the brook without a moment's hesitation, she jumped out of the yard and ran towards the fog. Kostya saw her, called out to her, but she disappeared into the fog without hearing. Kostya wanted to catch up with his mother, but Angelica called him, and they went to the clearing where his friends were playing with a ball. Kostya muttered when he saw Sashka and Pashka. He told them everything that had happened. They made excuses for each other. They assured that they had said nothing to anyone but their mother, and that they wouldn't tell anyone else. The children made up and started playing with rolling pins. Suddenly Sashka and Pashka fell to the ground, grabbing their right shoulder. No, Aunt Sveta, no, they shouted, writhing in pain. Tears appeared in their eyes. He tore it, Sashka muttered under his nose. Aha, replied Pashka. Stupid. Why did she go there? Without holding back tears, said Sashka. What will happen to Uncle Seriosha now? Pashka blurted out. Kostya looked at them, not understanding anything, and at the same time realizing that something had happened to his mother. Silently, without saying a word, he rushed home. Sobbing and endlessly wiping away tears and snot, Kostya sat at the priestess's house. Angelica sat beside him and tried to comfort him. And why us? The Sneguryovs were angry, and who should I give it to? To the Zhukovskys. The old woman sniggered, put him in a cage like the previous one, that he would barely live to see the right? Have you forgotten what a barely perceptible threat it was? But we don't want him. And you don't want his life either. They looked at each other unhappily. What if he tries to escape? He won't. He likes your girl, and with the first one, I've made him dark. He thinks nobody needs him in his own world. So if you take care of them properly, he won't go anywhere. But they wanted to argue, but the priestess's angry face made it hard to argue. Wake up. It sounded in the house. Kostya opened his eyes. He saw a ball and a familiar room. It flashed through his mind that he had dreamed it all. Quickly jumping out of bed, Kostya ran to the door. Opening it, he realized he wasn't home. There was no familiar corridor, and the walls of the next room were draped in grayness. Getting dressed, he came into the kitchen. Angelica was picking at thick porridge with a spoon. The new mother, silently, put a plate in front of Kostya. The same thick and unappetizing mass appeared in front of him. Kostya tasted it and squeaked. There was no flavor. I'm not Svetka. I won't fatten you up. Eat what I give you, or stay hungry. The woman was furious. After shoveling porridge into himself, Kostya went outside. Angelica stayed in the house. She hadn't drunk the Nutar yet. I don't want to stay in this world any longer, Kostya burst out through tears. He sat down on a dilapidated bench by the gate and wept. Kostya, someone called out to him. He turned around. There was no one around. Kostya, he heard again. Who is there? Kostya shouted. Baba Aglaya, you won't see me, I'm in your head. How did you get there? It doesn't matter. Kostya, bring me the purple flower and I'll send you home. I don't want to go home either. Why not? Kostya didn't say anything. Do you know how your mom died? She went into the fog. She forbade me to go, but she went herself. Why did she go? Kostya didn't say anything. She wanted to bring me a flower to send you home. That's not true. You're lying. She didn't want that. She wanted me to be with her. Always. She wanted you and the other children back in your own world. She wanted you to live, and the right would have killed you. You would have been sacrificed to the god of time. That's why she went for the flower. It's not true. You're lying. Kostya screamed again. A noise was heard in the distance. Kostya turned his head. Sergei was coming toward him. It's all your fault. You, shouted the man. If we hadn't taken you, she wouldn't have gone to the creek. She would still be alive. He pounced on Kostya, threw him from the bench to the ground and began to strangle him. Kostya did not resist. Hot tears fell down his face. Kostya closed his eyes. The man let him go. He sat down next to him. Who am I kidding? It's my fault. It's all my fault. If it's not you, it's someone else. She wanted kids so badly. And I was stupid and stubborn as a donkey. The man lay on his side, with his back to Kostya. I want to die, Sergei said in a low voice. Me too, Kostya whispered. The man lay on his back, then turned toward him. A pungent odor hit his nose. At that moment, Kostya realized that his father was drunk. The man laughed. She wanted you to live so much. If she had heard your words, she would have slapped you on the back. Kostya laughed too. I have no place in this world without Sveta, and you need to go back to yours. And the rest of us too. We've lived too long. I'm tired of stealing children. It's time for it to stop. We have to break the magic of time. Sergei stood up, and staggering from side to side, headed for the fog. Kostya followed him. No, I have to fix this myself. It was me who stole Grandma Aglaya's granddaughter from the human world. Because of me, she was sacrificed and the old woman was locked up. If it weren't for me, Grandma Aglaya would have broken the magic to save her girl. I can imagine how nervous she gets every year, fearing someone of her kind will be sacrificed again. The old woman hates us. Being punished for coming home late, Kostya and Angelica were left without dinner. Sneaking into the kitchen, Kostya learned about his father's death and the details of the ritual. The parents were angry that in addition to looking after the children and conducting the sacrifice, they would have to steal the mischief makers. Sergei's duties fell to the Sneguryov family by lot. Kostya stayed up almost all night, and in the afternoon, when the children went to play, he rushed to the forbidden place. Full of determination, he walked quickly through the fog-shrouded forest. Tall trees stood in dense rows next to each other. They, like an arch, overhung the winding path. The deeper Kostya entered the fog, the colder it became. The path turned sideways again, and Kostya saw snow-covered trees, bushes, and grass. As soon as Kostya stepped on the snow-covered ground, he felt icy gusts of wind. They developed shorts and t-shirt, penetrating with scalding cold. Shrinking, Kostya walked on. Snowflakes flung from the branches crashed into him, blinding him. The wind whirled, tree branches snapped. But Kostya stubbornly kept walking. The path turned again, and Kostya saw a glade covered with flowers, and behind it a shrouded, shaded lake, glowing with a faint yellow light. Kostya remembered the sunset on the river, where he was vacationing with his parents, remembered his friends, his school. A longing for his native world pinched in his soul. He looked around. In the distance, near a huge centuries-old oak tree, a brook was beating, near which a purple flower was growing. Kostya hurriedly approached it and sat down. His thin fingers touched the sharp petals. Plucking the flower, Kostya heard a growl. He turned around. A huge, like a bear, black dog looked at him with eyes glowing scarlet. If you looked closely, you could see the flames of hell in them. "Hush." "Hush," Kostya said, remembering an incident from his childhood when he and his mother had almost been attacked by dogs. Growling again, the dog lunged in Kostya's direction. He grabbed the black figure behind him with long legs and arms. Kostya rushed away. Screams and groans could be heard behind him. Barely had Kostya left the snow-covered area when a noise was heard. He turned around. The dog was approaching. His stomach cramped from fear, his legs shook, and unable to hold on, Kostya fell down. The dog stopped. For a few seconds he looked at him, and again he heard growling. Bared his fangs. "What?" The dog rushed toward Kostya. This time he clawed at the black creature with a ball of thread. Without wasting a moment, Kostya jumped to his feet and rushed away. Soon the sunlight appeared. His memories finally came back to him. Kostya remembered the day he had come to this world. Leaving the dangerous forest, Kostya headed toward the witch's house. After running most of the way, he stopped. His friends blocked the way. Pashka muttered, looking at the flower. "Yes," Kostya answered with difficulty, barely coping with his breath, in a low voice, as if he had thought of something very bad. "Are you bringing it to the witch?" "Aha." The guys looked at each other. "All right, bring it. We don't want to be children forever." Sashka and Pashka gave way. Running between them, Kostya heard the adults shouting. They urged the boys to stop him, but they didn't move. The adults jumped out of the yards to prevent them from reaching the house of Grandma Aglaia, but their legs were carrying them, and the closer Kostya got to the witch's house, the more tired he became. Running up to the fence and jumping over it, Kostya saw Granny Aglaia stirring a pot on the fire. The adults ran to the fence, and unable to get inside the enchanted yard, began to persuade Kostya not to give up the flower. Breathing heavily, Kostya approached the witch. He gave the flower. The old woman hastily took it, and quickly muttering an incantation, threw it into the cauldron. I was almost torn by a dog. Kostya, out of breath and not paying attention to the shouts, began to tell me, "Why didn't you warn him? He wouldn't touch you. You're from the world of the living and the dog can't see you. He's a guardian of the world of the dead and doesn't let them cross the border. By stopping time and living longer than we should, we've become part of the world of the dead. The fog Zervin created hides us from death, and this flower you brought is from the stream of life. It can cheat death, and if eaten, allow the dead to return to life. It's usually given to those on the edge between life and death. Like you. You remember how you came into this world, don't you? Yeah, me and my classmates were playing soccer. Then the ball rolled into the road and I followed it. And then my dad, he wasn't really my dad, but he grabbed my hand and I was here. Am I dead? No. He stole you from the other world. It was my idea," the old woman laughed, proudly gibbering, "It's dangerous to steal children just like that on the street. White witches and sorcerers can figure it out, and this way we create the illusion of death." In reality, the car would have passed by, but we created an illusion and everyone would think that you were hit. There's no search, no problem. Everyone is happy. The old woman's words made Kostya uncomfortable. "And you really decided to destroy the magic of time?" The old woman's face changed. Once cheerful, it became angry. "This is revenge," she cut her off. Kostya was afraid to ask anything. Without another word, Aglaia scooped up the potion and, muttering a spell under her breath, began to draw a pagan symbol on the ground. As soon as all the pieces came into contact, a bright violet light emerged from the ground and traveled upward toward the heavens. The sky was covered with purple clouds. "Goodbye, Kostya. Obey your father and mother." He barely heard through the noise of the stormy wind. The sky rumbled, and heavy raindrops rumbled. The fog melted, and yellow light illuminated the steppe, in the middle of which stood Kostya, Nastya, Maxim, and Angela. Blinded by the growing light, Kostya closed his eyes. When he opened them again, he saw a window and a woman sitting next to it. She was sobbing, looking at her 2-year-old daughter playing with a doll. "Mom," Kostya said with difficulty. The woman instantly turned around. "Sonny," she shouted, rushing to her son. She hugged him, kissed him. Kostya's body was gradually regaining sensitivity. The illusion that had replaced it melted away,